anything now. Alright, commissioners, do y'all have anything you wanna address before we get started?
I'd like to get these two gentlemen's name before they start.
John Rose, ROSC.
Jim Hart, HART.
The rest of you I got.
We'll get right into it and get our part done. The only one I've got on here is, Resolution 07, resolution approving the Benton County Animal Shelter to begin using a credit card reader in order to offer this payment option to the public for adoption of fees and sales of materials. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion on this?
I will add that, any fees that are associated with the use of this will be an upcharge, so it's not necessarily gonna cost the county anything net wise, it's gonna be an upcharge in addition, to whatever base fee that they pay.
What kind of materials do they sell?
Well, I would say they probably, they get some donations in, or they got some collars, they got some, things like that. It's kind of as needed if they ever do get materials to sell. It would be something, kind of retail oriented.
All right, do we have any other discussion on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, do the commissioners have anything else?
What about resolution 05?
I'll explain a little bit of this. The sheriff, as y'all know, months ago has kind of applied to purchase a 4x4 vehicle. And so at that time, we were thinking, well, this was before his money kind of got approved, so we thought, what kind of ways can we go that there might be some possible money? So Commissioner Hill and I put our heads together, we reached out to USDA first. And so, you're not gonna get unless you ask. And we were hoping at first we were told it might be $14,000, but then they went, and they finally came up with $12,000. So this kind of offsets the overall cost of that vehicle, depending on, Sheriff, you might be able to give us more insight of how much the 4x4 vehicle might cost us, but this is $12,000 towards that overall cost.
It was around $38,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. It was right in the same area as the patrol cars, the SUVs. It was within $1,000 of them. It might have even been a little bit cheaper than the SUV. I'm not positive on that.
So once that's received, we can invoice USDA for the,
Don't get reimbursed with it.
yes, $12,000 what they'll reimburse.
What kind of vehicle was that?
It's a Dodge pickup truck.
Oh, pickup.
Yes, sir.
Make a motion to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. Right, did I miss any others?
I got a question. Kenny, one question for you. You see the new budget that's come out.
Yes, sir.
Is that something you can live with?
I think so. There's a couple of things we went over this afternoon that the figures haven't been put into yet, but, yeah, I think it's not everything that we asked for, but I think the budget committee has done everything that they can do to work with us to get us as close to it, and I appreciate their work on it. They've worked long and hard on this, and I think they've done a real good job of getting us as close as we could get to what we needed. adding the, couple of positions in there that we desperately needed as forage deputies. And, the only thing that I didn't see in there was, 2 vehicles hadn't been put in a line item yet for the money for them. It says they're in there, but it doesn't say the money's been put in there yet. That's just glancing over it. But, the position for the other bookkeeper, that's really gonna help us out a lot. It's gonna speed a lot of things up around our office that's been needed for a long time. One bookkeeper just couldn't keep up. She's tried really hard, but she couldn't keep up. So, yes, I'm pretty good. We can get that lined up, but we haven't found anything else so far. Well, we've got the rest of this week to look it over, but right now, that's the only thing that I've seen in there. I just didn't see where we used to put $80,000 in there for 2 vehicles, and we know that's a little bit more than what it would be. But, I didn't see that money over in the line item.
All right. I'll work on that, see if we can get it, see what's going on with it. Cause before I agree to it, I want you as happy as we can make you.
Well, I appreciate y'all very much in the raise. My people at the sheriff's office desperately need it, and for it to keep us anywhere in competition with these other counties. And I met with Mark Florence today and, a couple other agencies, and we had that discussion about what demand there is for law enforcement now. Even the big counties that are paying a lot of money are having people leave because of the conditions being so bad, like in Nashville, places like that. And then in smaller counties, they just can't pay enough money to compete with them. So this will put us a little bit more in line with the others. I won't say it'll fix the problem, but it will make us more competitive. I appreciate that.
Okay, good. That's fine.
And I'll piggyback on a little bit what you said, because the $80,000 that he was talking about was what was allotted to him in the previous budget year. Am I correct, Sheriff, when I say that, remember? And our assumption was that he had already ordered the vehicles, and he actually has ordered the vehicles, but they just hadn't come in this fiscal year. So I guess, Mr. Gailey, does that go back to the capital reserve account that we have on Fund 171, or does that go as a payable?
Well, if you'd issued a purchase order for the vehicles in last fiscal year, then that money is set aside.
Kind of go as a payable, and when it comes in, we'll pay it.
Basically, yes.
So that was done, wasn't it? I mean, everything's ordered and,
Can we not do a reappropriation to put the money into this budget's line item here so that it's not a payable, we can just pay it through the, regular means?
You're gonna write a check for it either way.
I think
Okay,
what
it
the
doesn't
sheriff
matter,
was talking
potatoes are
about
tied.
is this year's budget, he had put in $80,000 for 2 more cars. And the budget committee voted not to fund that line item this year for the 2 cars. So we could give the raises and get, and try to get closer to it. So them 2 cars did get voted down in budget. So
Right,
it's
but he was
still-
looking for the previous because the
Right.
cars hadn't been paid for, that was his question.
then I misunderstood as far as.
Yeah, well, that's the way I took it.
Well,
I misunderstood.
No, you was right with what I was talking
Yeah,
about.
that,
I
don't
thought
shoot
we
the
was-
messenger, but it get voted down to answer your question.
Oh, well, I knew in the past, they had said, plan on 2 cars every year, and that's what I thought we was doing. I thought it was automatic, we'd go with 2 vehicles every year.
If it is, I didn't know about
That's- That
I'm
was
gonna-
a couple of years ago, that's when they started, 3 years ago, they started giving us 2 cars every year.
I'm gonna try to push for a lease on your cars.
Yeah.
So we can maybe get more than 2.
I'm fine with the lease thing. I know some of the surrounding counties are leasing, so that may be the way to go.
We can budget better for it too.
And I know that, I don't know what the age of these new cars, that when the first ones were received, that we purchased from the capital improvement bond.
They was 14 or 15.
Okay. So, and I believe we've discussed, eventually we have got to get to the time of what you call rotating cars in and out. I mean, that's a fact of life, that the lifespan of these cars it's something that we're gonna have to, if we didn't do it this budget, we're gonna have to look at our future budgets and plan for these rotations, for his, I guess you could say fleet that he's got, something, 12 years.
Well, if you lose so many a year, you're gonna constantly be turning them over, so.
And there's pros and cons to leasing, as opposed to purchasing. I've heard good on both of them, cons on both of them. So that's something that when it gets down to that point in time, we've got a year to think about that, what route we're gonna go, as a county. But we've got to do our homework too. We've got to get out there and we've got to talk to these other counties about how they did it and come up with the best plan to set them up for success. Now, I'll piggyback into the discussion of the day, if y'all don't mind. How we got here was we have recently appointed a civil service board. And there's always been one, but how active it's been and how hands-on it's been, we've appointed members who might have been ill, or who simply just did not take an interest in the board. From the mayor's perspective or the county commission's perspective, I look at that as that's a leadership responsibility to be on top of. If your board members aren't showing an interest or whatever, it's either our peers or the mayor's office that needs to be proactive in doing it. Well, we didn't. We kept these committees kind of on paper for a long time, and our sheriff's department, one day they're operating and you've got a board, next minute you've got a board that is disappeared on you, gone AWOL, and another minute the board's not fully, functioning or whatever it may be. This goes back years, and the way we approached it years ago and looking up the history, and I believe Commissioner Ward might be able to, but originally something was passed that it seemed like the county kind of did a private act. It kind of created a civil service board based upon its terms, and I believe it got stamped like in 2005 or 6. I just know it went to the clerk's office and it got stamped. Well, about 2 months later, you come back and there's a whole new resolution kind of, everything we did before is null and void. We're going to go with the straight 1974 Sheriff Civil Service Board. What has been done since that passage, I don't believe it has been altered in any way, that we're still functioning over whatever the state law is. It's my understanding that is what's in place at this point in time. So one of the things I've done, I'm kind of the new guy on the block, the sheriff. In the past, working with them, seeing that we've got a civil service board, we've got vacancies and voids. Well, I did what any mayor was thinking they got to do. We need to fill these positions. We need to have an active board. So I appoint, they ratify, and so we've got a board. We've got 3 good members who have a lot of heart and want to invest themselves. But there seems to be, I don't want to say a disconnect. What do I do? Is what I'm doing right, but they haven't been following it in the past. Whatever it may be, that's what brought this discussion to where we are today. It's trying to get these roles and responsibilities and duties as boards, commissioners, sheriff's department working. Ultimately, we should all be a partnership. We should all be working on behalf of the public citizenry and safety. So that is what brought you here before me today to present to the board any of your expertise and knowledge. I've received some questions from some board members. One of them wanted to be here. I think one is en route to be here. As you read them, those are just some questions that was posed to me that I want to pass on along to y'all. But this is the law enforcement committee's meeting, so that I want them to drive the show. Whether the civil service meets tonight, it's not important. It's that they're in the house to hear what we've got to be said. And so again, I'm gonna turn it back over to the chairman.
Well, I kind of turn it over to y'all. If y'all got anything, we're willing to listen. As it goes on, people in the audience may have questions if y'all don't mind answering.
Thank you. I'll just start off real quick, and then I want to ask Terry to, he's got some answers to the questions we had previously, but the best place to start is the sheriff's civil service law of 1974. In the TCA code, it spells out what the requirements are. And what I would suggest strongly is that it's TCA 8-8-401, and it's called, the official title is the County Sheriff's Civil Service Law of 1974. As you can imagine, there's lots of things that changed since 1974. There's a lot of things that are not specifically covered in there. Although the law gives some very specific things, and I won't take the time to go into everything, but it tells you how the board's supposed to be formed, who appoints the board, how the terms are, what they have control over, what they don't have control over. But it still says that the board will develop a set of policies and procedures. So I think that's one of the big things that I think that you all need to look at, is that even though the law gives you a lot of guidance, you still need to adopt, as a civil service board, specific policies and procedures. And then that board governs, since the sheriff's office falls under, they would govern what they call in the law fringe benefits of the employee handbook. So although the sheriff still has an employee handbook, as you know, as long as the sheriff has one, if he doesn't have one, then it defers to the county, but the sheriff does have one. But the aspects of that handbook that deal with fringe benefits, time off, grievances, suspension, demotions, all those things, promotion, that all comes under the Civil Service Board purview. Now, so even though the law says that's your responsibility and that's your authority, you still have to come up with policies on how to administer that. So there's still a lot of work to do, even though the law gives you what your main responsibilities are. To my knowledge, once you adopt the Civil Service, Sheriff's Civil Service Law of 1974, you're stuck with it, for better or worse. I don't think there's any provisions right now to get out of it. It took you a 2/3 vote to get into it, but now you have it. There's certain things in there that say, you shall. And I know Charlie will tell you that in county government, one of the first things I learned was, if it says you shall, that means you must, you have to do it.
It's not a suggestion.
Yeah, it's not a suggestion. And if it doesn't say you can do it, then typically you cannot do it. But there's some very specific things in there saying what you shall do. And one of those is you shall have policies. With a sheriff, it says, you shall appoint a member, and they're not a voting member, they're just a member that becomes the secretary of that Civil Service Commission. So that allows them to take the minutes and also be involved, and then typically that person has access to personnel files and stuff, which will need that too. So there's a lot of things in there that if you read through it, I won't spend all the time with everybody's thing, but that's something I would strongly suggest that everybody that's interested in, and certainly the law enforcement community and certainly the Civil Service Board needs to become very familiar with that law. Then Terry Wood, Terry Hazard has a lot of experience in this, and I forwarded him the questions that we talked about, and he went through and actually picked out the specific parts of that law that addresses at least the first set of questions that we received last week, and I'll turn it over to Terry here for a few minutes.
Just to piggyback on what John was saying, that several counties have done this. The Civil Service Board for the county adopted the law, but the law then gives you instructions, and very few counties follow those instructions to develop the policies and procedures and the process that has to be in place for it to operate. I have an email from June 28th. They had several questions from Martin Tyler. First question is, can another agency do the civil service test for a county not created by our civil service board? I think that the simple question is yes. TCA 88414D. Yes.
If you need to, you're welcome to come up here to the table. If you need some more chairs, if y'all want to come up here, I'll give it.
All tests shall be practical and shall consist only of subjects which will fairly determine the capacity of the person examined to perform the duties of the position that the appointment is going to be made. Tests may include examination for physical fitness, manual skills. No questions shall relate to religious or political opinions. Now, I was handed a second set of questions from today. And something on it kind of concerned me. It says the current test is a work entry test given by the adult education, but we are not allowed to see the test. It's kind of hard for the Civil Service Board to know. You've got, the sheriff has to come up with the job description for each position. So an entry level test for a patrolman would be different from an entry level test at the jail. Certainly different from a sergeant's test or a detective exam. So you can't just go with one test. Something to consider on the test is if the Civil Service Board decided, okay, we're gonna make up these tests ourselves based on the job descriptions and the way they think the right person could be hired for that position. So you write the test and it works well, but then what if a minority files suit and says that test is discriminatory? It's kind of hard to defend that if going to court and say, well, who wrote it? And they say, well, me and two other white guys, you know. So there are several companies out here that you can buy law enforcement entry tests, dispatcher tests, correction officer tests. The other part of today's question is what I didn't have until a few minutes ago, wanted to know who would have to pay for these tests. Well, there's somewhere in the civil service law it says that the test, the county has to pay for it. You don't pass that on to the people taking the test. I think that's probably that thing.
And that's one of those things that it seems like an expense up front when somebody says, look how expensive these tests are, but it may save you a whole lot more in the future. A lot of grief. Or a lawsuit.
It's one point for the sheriff to appoint somebody to be secretary. If the members are getting paid for the meeting, does she also or he also get paid, or is the sheriff department responsible for paying for them?
I can answer that, sir. I'm paid my hourly wage by the sheriff's department for being secretary at the civil service meeting.
She's not a civil service board member or voting
Right,
member.
so she
That just
don't get
refers to
paid.
it just refers to the board. As a
And I
board
think
member.
I've read where it says the person that he will appoint will be someone from his department. I mean,
Exactly.
they will have some subject matter.
Exactly, that's the whole point.
And the tests that he was talking about, they're role-specific tests.
Correct. Usually job task analysis are done, or in private industry, we talk about job task analysis, and, so it's something that's specific to that job task. And like Terry was saying, being able to have that commercially available, they seem expensive a lot of times. I've been in law enforcement before, and when you're having to purchase these tests, they may seem expensive. Why would these cost hundreds of dollars? But on the back end, if you end up being challenged or sued, it'd be a lot cheaper than an hourly rate of an attorney probably to even be a consultation. And that way you know that they're fair, and you should have an opportunity to review those, in my opinion.
Right.
You have to have some level of trust for your board that you can review those and see, this is applicable to Los Angeles, but not Benton County, so we don't like this test, But I think it would be reasonable. And they should have enough versions of those tests where, the same test can be administered maybe a dozen times and it look differently each time, so it keeps people from,
If they buy these tests, who should be in charge of administering them and giving them out?
The Civil Service Board can. Different vendors have different processes. Some vendors will have a process where you can proctor your own tests and you can send them back to them for being graded and administered, or you can take on that role yourself. And the Civil Service Board can handle it themselves and has.
Mr. Gailey, I'll ask you, would this be something that the commission would budget under law enforcement, or would this be budgeted under civil service? Because I really didn't budget much under civil service.
The civil service budget now is basically paying the members'
Payroll, yes, sir. But for the tests of a sheriff's department, if it's required by the civil service board, I would think it would fall under civil service.
We just need to add a line item.
So we talking about a web-based company?
There probably is such things at the time, typically they've been paper in the past, and I've dealt with them. Because if you do have a web page, you're gonna have to have everybody in a location where they can take them under some type of a proctor exam, but I would imagine it's better up there to go to a school or something to do that.
All right, we have a question from Ms.
Not a question, the sheriff did look into all of those options back when we just had, the 3 older members. And the reason we went with just a standardized and, basic knowledge test, and for promotions, the Department of Education provides an ethics test, which if you're gonna promote someone, you know, what their ethics and morals are is pretty important as you advance with more power in your position. But he looked into all these options, they were extremely expensive, and we simply did not have a budget to do that with. I mean, we would love to have more correct tests for each position, but, you know, with our budget the way it was, that just wasn't an option, and here was this great option, and we wouldn't have to worry about proctoring the test or anything, because the Department of Education was happy to do it. It just seemed like a win-win at the time.
It sounds like if we do it the proper way, it won't be in y'all's budget to start with, so.
Well, but we
we'll have to
didn't
add a
know that,
line
we
item.
figured we'd have to
Right,
pay
right.
for it all.
That's why we've got these guys here
Yes.
to teach us.
Okay, there was the next question. Can our sheriff's department hire deputies without taking a civil service test? In the code, it says that the sheriff shall ask for a list of eligibles for whichever position they're going to hire. If the civil service board does not furnish him a list of names within 30 days, he can hire off the street without any tests, and they will automatically be grandfathered in as covered under civil service.
Well, what if they furnish him names and he don't use them? And he goes outside and hires somebody?
You need to look at the quality of people that are listed, I mean, that have tested. You could exhaust the entire list, and then the civil service board would need to advertise and test again, you offer the test again, and that's another issue.
I mean, well, what if they send a good qualified person to the sheriff's department?
And he's not following the rules under the 1974 Act.
Either that, or it's subjective on, you know, who I think would make a great employee and who you think make a great employee, and they're different. And, you know, I think it's up to the sheriff. I mean, he's the one that's gonna have to supervise them and working for him.
So if they got a guy that hadn't been in the police work and he passes the test, and they've got to send him off to school to get trained, and he overlooks somebody that's got 10 years police experience, that's an ideal candidate, what's your situation there?
Be up to the sheriff. Maybe I fired that guy from my agency, and now he's over here trying to get a job. So you have to see the whole picture.
But they still have to go back to the list, right?
Right. And you still go back to the list.
If I'm not, maybe I'm misunderstanding. What you're saying is, if he doesn't hire anybody on the list that you send him, can he then just go out into the public and hire anybody? And the law is he has to keep going back to the list.
And they would have 30 days
Right.
to
So
test more people and provide
he
more.
has to
names.
hire from your list. He doesn't
Well,
have
what if
to,
they refuse to follow the list?
then they're in violation of the civil service law that you passed. And
Probably what it does is, and this is maybe a layman's interpretation, is that if the civil service board.
Excuse me, gentlemen, and ladies, I've got to go because I don't, I may fill this place up.
Thank you for being here, Bill.
But I excuse me, I mean, I hate to, but, you just don't know what that goes with.
So the way I would interpret it is if the civil service board is proactive in their part and they've got the list to go by, to me, the ultimate discretion of hiring though reverts back to the sheriff. I mean, he knows what he's looking for, he knows qualifications, and if he goes outside the list, to me, it just renders an opportunity for what you call a protest or something of that nature. But if there is no challenge or anything of that nature, to me, the ultimate discretion still falls back on the sheriff to be able to hire him.
Let me clarify one thing for this bill. If the sheriff exhausts the list, then he needs, the civil service board needs to give him more names from a list that he would still have to choose from. And I don't know how many times you would do that. You know, if the sheriff wouldn't hire anybody that you're sending over, then there's an issue, right? I mean, we understand that, but you're right. He would have to hire off the list and not off the street unless the civil service board couldn't give him any more names.
And what you're saying is, you're saying, what if he ignores the whole process and goes out? Well, then he's in violation of that, and then, I don't know what the enforcement mechanism is on that, but there certainly would be some things that you would speak with your county attorney, and there'd be some things in there that you could do. I'm sure you could refuse to bring that person in as an employee, I would think. I'm not an attorney, but, you know, the person is not a legitimate employee, so, but the idea is that following the law, as long as you're providing lists, he's gotta hire off that list.
But if the sheriff, if he has somebody, you know, hey, he's interested in a job,
Go take
all
the
he's
test.
gotta do is just
Go take the
refer
test.
them to the committee and say, hey, take the test.
And if they pass the
get
test,
vetted, then
right, if they
then
pass
we'll
the
go.
test with the, you know, with the score that gets them on the list,
Right.
then he has an opportunity to interview. The only time the law, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only time the law allows for him to not hire off a list that you provide is when you refuse to provide a list within 30 days. And that's just to keep him from being stalled by maybe a dysfunctional commission or something. But you're correct, as long as you're providing a list, that's where he's supposed to get his people from.
So the way I look at it is applicants should apply to the civil service board.
Yes, and there's certain things in the law that tells them when they do that, what your responsibilities are back to that person. You know, you're not allowed to charge for it. You have to tell them what the pay is for that job. You have to tell them what the job description is for that, which goes back into why you need a job description. You have to tell them what the process is.
So if I may interrupt here for a second, one of the codes that Terry referenced says, under 88415 subparagraph A, whenever a vacancy occurs in any position in the classified section of the office of the sheriff shall ask the board for the names and addresses of all eligible persons, those who have taken the test. The board shall certify the names of all persons on the eligible list for that position within 30 days of the sheriff's request, which he just referred to. The sheriff shall investigate each of the 5 highest on the list of eligibles. So if you had them prioritized 1 through 15, 1 through 15, he takes the top 5 and investigates them, looks at them. If none of the 5 eligibles are acceptable to the sheriff shall investigate the next 5 eligible on the list, and another one until one of the eligibles investigated is acceptable. The sheriff shall appoint this person to the position and notify the board of such action. So he may only have 1 position or 3 positions that he's hiring for. Say the board agrees to, we'll give you 10 names, the top 10 off of our list, or the top 20, whatever it may be. He takes 5 at a time, starting at the top, and sort of determines. He knows that Jim Hart worked in Henry County several years ago, and he calls the sheriff and says, was he a good employee, would you rehire him? Probably not. Didn't do anything wrong, but probably not for law enforcement. The sheriff may eliminate him from the list, but that's sort of how that process goes, is he looks at 5 at a time, he looks at that process.
And that is spelled out in that law, that civil service law of 1974. And that's why I didn't want to read the whole thing to you, but there's very specific things already in there, and then you adopt policies to fill in those gaps specific to Benton County. But to answer your question, you're correct. He must go from the list. He doesn't have to hire anybody from the list, but he's not supposed to hire outside the list unless you refuse to give him a list.
Within 30 days.
Within 30 days. And what that enforcement mechanism is, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but he's outside of the law.
Pretty much the way we've been trying to handle it so far.
The enforcement of the mechanism is called a writ of mandamus. Any elected official's not doing their job. Somebody can file a complaint, go before the circuit judge. The judge orders them to start doing their job by the law, and if they don't, they're in violation of a court order. And then that takes care of itself at the end of the day.
Right.
The next question is, should the names of the applicants that have taken the test stay on the list forever or be dropped after a certain amount of time? The law specifically says that the list is good for 1 year and may be extended for 1 year. So it really forces you to keep fresh names and fresh people on there.
And if you have good people applying, they're not gonna be around in a year anyway.
That's right.
You know, so you should expect to be given these tests. You know, when you go to look for a vendor, if you decide to do that, I would look for somebody that's gonna, let you have the right to use these tests for a period of time as opposed to single tests, because that way if you feel like a need to give it every 2 months, you could.
But on the other hand, it also, like the sheriff, the second one may be a good applicant, the third one may be a good applicant, and it just keeps them having to go back through the process again and again.
It's good
and
for
again.
them, yeah, it's good for them.
The sheriff had a question. The question is this okay, what we're doing right now? We have a lady that gives the civil service test at any given time that an applicant comes in, and we give them their application and tell them to contact civil service test, and they contact her. She'll most times give it to them that day or the next. Is that acceptable, or does it have to be every so often? I just want to be able to move them as fast as we can.
It's no problem as long as the Civil Service Board, Civil Service Commission decides that's their policy. Whoever you're gonna use and how it's gonna be administered, and how the process is gonna flow, they can determine that. And that's a good example, Sheriff, of how the law tells you what your responsibilities are, but that would be an example of your standard operating procedure of how you get it done, which would be different for Benton County than Henry County than Dixon County. So if that works for you all, as long as that's not anything that's in violation of what the law says you're supposed to do, that's more of an administrative thing that that you write your own policy procedure. That may be what works for you.
She sends them, if I'm correct, David, at that point, the lady that gives the test comes around and sends y'all the.
It's what she has been doing, correct.
And she sends that to them, and we don't
We
see
don't
that.
see it, yeah.
Until we call them and tell them we need somebody.
And there again, that's just, that's something specific to you all, if you decide that's how you want
But
it.
that's okay that she can use it more often than.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're just going to put all that in writing.
Exactly.
To get it done.
Because then somebody else comes in and wants to take it.
Right.
You say, well, I'm not giving it for 6 months because I don't like the way your hair looks. So,
Right.
You gotta have some consistency.
And she's gonna have to start giving a job-specific test instead of.
I think she's doing that on promotions right now. She's already doing.
It's just something we're going to look to see what kind of testing we want to try to use. I mean, whatever's going to be easy for the county to take on. I mean,
Well, it might be interesting to ask her if anyone has ever given her any suggestions or instructions on what kind of questions should be asked. I mean, she could tweak the thing and
Right.
make it work perfectly.
Right. We just may have to sit down with a meeting with her and say, this is what we need, can you
Right.
provide it?
Exactly.
And she may ask for those job descriptions.
Right.
Those different kinds of positions.
I would hope
So
so.
she has them, and then can sort of make sort of test sort of aligns with that.
What if the sheriff does not appoint a representative from his office to act as secretary? Going back to what Charlie said earlier, there's a lot of shalls in here, that's a shall. The sheriff shall appoint someone, and sheriff has already agreed that he would do that. We talked to him out in the hallway a while ago.
The reason the legislature put that language in there, that individual, whoever it is, I assume it's this lady back here, but that employee becomes a liaison between the board and the sheriff. That way the sheriff, he's got confidence, he knows what's going on, he don't have time to go there and watch and see what's going on. But it keeps the line of communication between the commission and the sheriff's department. So I know that's what the legislature had on their mind when he did that. And the sheriff's not gonna not do that, because he wants to know what's going on.
She runs the office.
Plus, it's a state law anyway. I mean, he's gotta do it.
And one thing that I want to hope we get as a takeaway is the Civil Service Board really should be working on behalf of the sheriff. I mean, we should be a partnership in this and not adversarial.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I feel like maybe the adversarial part has been created because the Civil Service Board has kind of been a little dormant, and things. But now that's going to change, and that's why we hope that all this is a partnership.
The Civil Service Board can be one of the sheriff's best friends, because when people come in and want you to hire so-and-so because of so-and-so, you say, have the young gentleman or young lady go take the test. They make it on the roster, I'll give them a fair interview. Well, that puts a layer there, or gets rid of a layer of politicism that if I was a sheriff, I'd like. You know? And the sheriff, in a conversation earlier today, said that exact same thing.
Yes.
That he was a fan of it, you know. And so when it's working right, you're absolutely right, Mary. It works. It's to the benefit of everybody, including the person out there that doesn't know anybody and wants to get a job, and they feel like they have this control. They take a test and they have their own, you know, destiny in their own hands. So it's a win.
Because he doesn't, it really, the sheriff can appoint someone to be his representative. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone from law enforcement.
It's supposed to be somebody from his office. It's supposed to be one of his personnel.
His department.
Because they're swamped, and you know, it's just another duty, and I thought, what if he went to the board and designated?
It's supposed to be a sheriff's department personnel, because you want them to have, like you were saying, that intimate knowledge of how things work, and ideally somebody like Rochelle, who has the human resources aspect of it, the personnel file aspect of it, the bookkeeping.
It specifically says someone with the, that has the personnel file, somebody has access to them.
I was just trying to help Rochelle, because she's got 37 things to do right now.
Well, you're gonna hire another bookkeeper,
He's
right?
hired another bookkeeper to take on something.
Yeah, not this though. You want the experienced person doing that.
And this is a good question too. It says with the lack of having a proper civil service board, should we abolish the old roster and start over? My gut reaction is probably, but we've already talked about how you need these fresh lists of competent folks, and I think, you know, really that's probably already been answered, because like John was saying, if somebody's been on there for 8 months or a year and they can't get a job somewhere else in law enforcement, then you probably don't want to hire either.
The sheriff's already looked over them. If he's already looked over them, you got 20 applicants, and the sheriff's gone through all 20 of them, and none of them are suitable. It ought to behoove the commission to start doing some more testing, because obviously those didn't suit the sheriff. He's out there to protect the public. And if he's,
I mean, if they've got to develop tests for them, why should the commission have to go and get 20 more? He ought to be able to find what he needs out of that list.
I guarantee you I can go get you 20 applicants you wouldn't want to hire.
I mean, if it's that way, you don't need a civil service board.
But, no, I believe you need one.
About?
But if they're putting eligible people up there, but just like Terry said a while ago, the sheriff's going to do some background checks. He might find out something that the Civil Service Commission doesn't have a clue about.
Exactly.
And if he's passed over somebody, he may pass over somebody because there's somebody down the list that's better. He may come back to that other layer. But if somebody keeps getting passed over, that should be an indicator you need more applicants. You need some more applicants so the sheriff can look at it.
And what this also tells me from the civil service, if they're proactive, there doesn't have to be an opening for them to accept applications.
Oh, no.
They're doing their job. They're already taking these applicants in, and when the sheriff has a vacancy, they've got that list ready to go right there.
That's what's
and so that tells us we need to budget. Well, we've got it in the advertising. We can pull from the mayor's office to run these advertisements.
We're just gonna do some background checks on, see what these tests are gonna actually be for us.
Yeah. But for next year's budget, we need to think about maybe even having an advertising line for civil service that's outside of what runs to the mayor's office for public notices.
Did I hear you correctly? You said they should bring the applications to us. Is that what you said a while ago, or did I? My only concern about that is that's a lot of personal information for. To me, they need to be turned into the sheriff's office, and then we pick them up from there personally. Because that's personal information that
You don't want the
That or-
personal information.
No, I don't.
Or the secretary could bring them to the meetings.
That's where I'm trying to get. So we got a process, and we know what needs to be done.
And there again, that's something you can put in your specific policy.
Okay.
Because there's some civil service boards.
But what you need here is she takes them with her. What you need here is it sounds like that if I walked in today and said I'm interested, within a few days I can take this test. Well, when I was a lot younger, I applied at Metro Nashville and Highway Patrol, and there's 150, 200 people taking the test at one time. And only the top folks, got the interviews and stuff. And
There you go.
Yeah.
this is a unique situation that you can get someone in and tested, because usually the civil service will maybe only test twice a year and have 50 to 75 names on the list. And then what starts happening is when you start reaching out and saying, we'd like to interview you, they say, well, I'm already working at so-and-so PD. So the list they go quickly. I mean, if somebody's wanting in law enforcement, they're gonna come around and get a job.
And you may decide in your policies that you're gonna still use the same lady, the same test, the process is gonna be, the Civil Service Board decides in their policy procedures that somebody comes in, brings it into the sheriff's office, the person meets the minimum application requirements, they can hand those people a piece of paper that directs them to the person that gives the test, and then the scores go to the Civil Service Board, and all they see is the score and the person's name and some kind of identifying number.
Right.
But that's something that will work for you all, that maybe would be different.
The Civil Service Board would actually, they would develop the application.
They could, yes.
You don't need to know an applicant's social security number,
No.
but you need to know their work history.
Correct.
You need to know what their education levels are. There's not much that would need to be redacted on that particular application.
And then when the sheriff gets that top 5, he can then do a background check, which would require them to fill out additional information that his investigator can then go and get credit checks and different things.
Do they score the test, or they take the test? Is there any kind of score at all?
Yes, there is.
So you put a threshold on it, and if nobody makes it beyond that threshold, they never end up on your list in the first place. That goes back to your policies and procedures. You know, you set that in the commission would set that as policies and procedures. They gotta hit a certain threshold, or we're not even gonna list them.
Right.
Who creates the Civil Service Board policies and procedures? The board. 88409, 411, and 413 specifically lists the duties and what, it doesn't tell you what the policy is going to be, but it tells you what needs to be included in the policy.
And could I just interject here? There's a lot of times we see in county government, all kinds of, I guess probably city government too, is a tendency to just go get somebody else's policies. It's okay to look at somebody else's for a starting point, but Benton County, like every other county, is unique. And you have certain, things that work for you and certain things don't work for you. So I would strongly suggest that that's going to be the work. That's going to be the work for the board, is to put that work in on that. Work for the sheriff's office will be developing the job task analysis, the job descriptions. So there's going to be some work that needs to be done by people here as opposed to somebody else outside handling it, because otherwise it won't be specific enough to be useful.
And then the question on filing grievances, does the employee file through the sheriff, the mayor's office, or directly to the board? And they go directly to the board.
And then that 1974 law will tell you, if the sheriff suspends somebody for less than 10 days, there is no grievance.
That's right.
But yet, and it can only do it for up to twice in 6 months. So things like that would then be mirrored into your policies. So you're being compliant with the law, but you would spell it out in the policy, so the employee wouldn't have to read the law, they could read the policy. So those two have to match up. But the law gives you tons of, sort of like the outline, and then you gotta fill in the specifics for your policy of, okay, who do they go to, who do they talk to, how's it gonna be done?
I have a question. Okay, let's say I've got this second bookkeeper that if the budget passes, I'll get to hire. Now, let's say I want to hire someone within our own department. Do we have to go through the whole civil service thing, or do you get is there a different procedure if you want to hire within? It would not be a promotion because they would have to take a pay cut to work with me because I'm the lowest paid one there. But let's say I posted a job because it would be nice to get someone who understands our office. And let's say there's an employee that in their other job was a bookkeeper before they came to us for whatever. Do we have to follow the same, fill out an application, take the civil service test? Or if you're hiring within, can you circumvent some of that?
Would they be grandfathered in? Because they already work there.
Does the person already work there?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to post the job in office first, just to see if any other employee would be
Okay,
interested.
so is it a job or a position, a lateral transfer position, like you would if you want to work in transportation as opposed to working at a guard station?
I think it's a uniform position to a clerical civilian
Yeah,
position.
because
So
we
then it
have
is a job
dispatchers, we have
Yeah.
correction officers, and we have deputies. That's all we've got.
The civil service law says the sheriff has the ability to transfer people within the classification. So if I'm a daytime sergeant and he needs a nighttime sergeant, he can say, you're gonna start working 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. starting tomorrow. He doesn't have to go through the civil service board, my pay didn't change, I'm civil sergeant, I'm within the same pay grade. So, I think what you're saying though is, even though they already work there, they're going, well,
It's a different job.
Let's say there's a
different job
correction officer.
classification that wants to go to patrol.
It's different.
Well, no, that wants to be a bookkeeper.
It's
I mean,
different.
let's say there's someone in corrections who they took that job, they're doing that job, but let's say they did bookkeeping in a previous job. And, let's say they say, hey, I know you've got a bookkeeper position, I'd like to apply for it. Do they have to go through the same
Yep.
process? Okay, they do.
Because it's in a different job classification.
Okay, I
And if
thought,
it's the same classification, no, they could transfer, and then you'd hire a new person.
so they'll just have to take the test over again, get in the list of people for bookkeeping for us to look at.
We had a similar situation that happened at my last facility, and they took the civil service test to go into classification. And under that specific job classification, there was a typing test required as part of the process. And this person would have been the best person for that job, but could never pass the typing test. We're disqualified. On the other hand, I've heard of someone that came into it, was reclassified into a position. And over a period of time, they decided they wanted to go back in uniform, but there was no positions.
So they were stuck.
The job was being done away with, so they were stuck, so.
Okay.
There's sense about it.
Thank you.
From the mayor's perspective, and that may be somewhat selfish on my part, we had budgeted for a bookkeeper's position. So this kind of tells me this process that there would be a job description for a bookkeeper. So I'm very interested and concerned that they hire a bookkeeper. I think it would help our office interact between one another, with that particular function, vital function to his office. Now, she is performing the bookkeeper duties right now, and she may be very good at it. So if she doesn't stay at it, then the person that she hires I'm one of these that's very interested that they hire a bookkeeper. I don't want someone who kind of did bookkeeping for a paint store, their daddy's paint store, 20 years, whatever. So I have an interest in this particular position that you're going to hire for. And however, if only one applicant applies for it, or whatever, then, the discretion to me falls back on the sheriff's office.
And there's still be discretion at 50 people, because you're gonna send the top 5 and then
Next five.
the next 5 and the next 5. So, there again, it's writing like Jim was saying, in that particular job he was talking about, that it was a typing test. So, when you develop your job description, you put things in there that are very specific for that position, that only person that would be qualified would meet those categories, and then make the test applicable to it. And then that's how you ensure you're getting minimally qualified people. Like your job descriptions become very important.
And the code says that this is a new position, that the civil service board shall work with the sheriff. And, okay, this new position, what are they gonna be doing? What's the educational, you could even suggest to the sheriff, I wish that they would be able to do X, Y, and Z, because it would really help with payroll or whatever for your office, and see if they would include those things in the job specifications that you're gonna advertise and test for.
I promise not to get in the way, I just had to ask that question.
No, that's a good question.
Once we develop this policy and procedure, does it need to be looked over and approved by somebody from y'all's office before we put it in place to make sure everything was covered?
The wise thing would be if you set out to do the policies and procedures, get 3 or 4 different counties that have actually got a civil service commission functioning, get a copy of their policies and procedures, and let the commission sit down and look at the things that they think really apply to Benton County, and the things that don't, put them to the side. You'll be able to look at 3 or 4 different ones and use them as a template and come up with what suits you the best.
I would also get with your county attorney.
Right.
And hand them a copy of the Sheriff's Civil Service Law 1974, and hand them a copy of his policies and procedures. And from the legal analysis,
right,
are we good to go? Are we good to go? And then, and if I could just, before this thought leaves me, because that happens sometimes now, it's over, I talk freely, but if I was sitting there thinking, okay, what the heck do we do next? The first thing I would do is on the Civil Service Commission is I would start writing down my action items, and you could take the Civil Service Law of 1974 and go through it paragraph by paragraph, and it'll tell you what your action items will be, and you start, okay, we gotta work on this policy, we gotta make sure we get the sheriff's representative there, we gotta start doing our research on our tests, so you get all these things, and then that will really start to build your policy and procedures for you.
The other thing I would advise is each year we publish the Index of Acts. And the Index of Acts updates every change to the law that's going to occur to include anything within the code as it relates to civil service. And if you borrow, as Charlie mentioned, you borrow and look at some other counties and their policies that they give you are 5 years old or 6 years old or 10 years old, put them in the trash, okay, because they're not current. In law enforcement corrections, we're revising policies and procedures and operational manuals annually, a detailed review of those. And so unless the Civil Service Board is doing that annual review of where they're going to borrow, they're probably dated.
There are many people that I speak with, Jim, Terry, I admit it myself, we worked for some pretty large counties for many years, and when we came to work at CCAS and started really researching stuff and looking at stuff and talking to our in-house attorneys, sometimes we look at each other and go, we weren't doing it right. And why did we do it that way? Because it's always been done that way. And and we fell into the same thing. So we always give that advice because there was stuff we did for years that wasn't within what we should have been doing because those things change all the time. And we're just in a position now to be able to sit there and read this stuff. We have the time to do it. Plus we have the attorneys to ask for help. And we get the same questions over and over again. So it forces us to look at it. But as your Civil Service Board is working on this, and you get to a certain point, I'd be happy to come back and sit down with you. We don't write policy for people because it turns out not to be a good policy for those people. But I'd be more than happy to help in some of the guidance. And also, I'd like to spend some time with them and showing them what we call ELI, which is our electronic library. And there's tons of information on there that would then help you to stay current year after year. Like the Index of Acts. Board attorneys probably spend a month on that and just do a presentation at the Sheriff's Association at the end of the month. And that's just to keep them up to date. All that information is electronically available, but when I was working in a sheriff's office, I didn't know it existed. Nobody showed me. So, I'd be happy to come back and, as you're working along on that, sit down with you for a work session if you want.
And then what is considered fringe benefits, there's an Attorney General's opinion that basically says the County Civil Service Board has the sole discretion on the benefits of everybody under their protection. So your wage and hour laws take care of overtime, Family Leave Act, American Disabilities Act. If you're to go to the military and come back, it's specifically in this old law that you would come back at your same position. Well, there's federal law now that requires that. That would trump our state law. But whether you get time and a half on your birthday, or whether you get 2 weeks vacation or 6 weeks vacation, all of that stuff is up to the Civil Service Board to decide for the deputies. So it could be different from your countywide policy, and probably would be.
But it would all be subject to funding from the county commission.
I was gonna say, now that needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be funded.
But that could dramatically change it.
I mean, they decide the benefits, everybody had his own car to drive home with that. That may not work.
Right.
Gotta be have the financing for it.
So that one can cause some issues, obviously.
But the sheriff still maintains a handbook of the other items not covered under fringe benefits. So it's some civil service boards, think that they have more oversight than they do, and some don't take the oversight that they do have. I'm not saying either one here. I'm just saying there's limitations and.
I'll interject. Let's take civil service policy. They come up with policy. Do they pass policy and then it come before this committee and they endorse it and it go on before a full body vote by the commission?
The law doesn't.
And or their outcome is the rules, so to speak, right?
It would be the rule, but I think it'd be wise on the commission's part to interface with the law enforcement committee and the sheriff and say, this is what we're thinking. Do you see a problem with this? I mean, air it out before you put it on, you know, finalize it. But they got the horsepower to adopt it themselves. But it would be foolish not to check with the other players that are involved in this.
And that's why we structured the Civil Service Board to meet the same time, or not the same time, but right after law enforcement, so that they can attend both each other's meetings, if they're talking and they're discussing this out, just the efficiency that process builds and everything. Can the Civil Service Board obligate something that the county commission has to put their stamp of approval on? So if they say we're gonna do fringe benefits, or they say it's something like this, we're gonna provide whatever, and I guess, does that mean, hey, when the budget comes up, if that the county commission somewhat is obligated to follow that process, or can they just halt it by saying we're not gonna fund it?
Correct, you're not, the county commission is not obligated to fund anything, except what state law requires. You can't spend, if somebody won the lottery and give you $10 million for Benton County today, you couldn't spend one red cent of it until the county commission appropriated that money. They might decide that 90% of it need to go in reserves. You can't spend any of it until they agree to it. What the commission actually would be at that point on fringe benefits, they would be advocates. They say, this is what we want to do, and this is what it's going to cost. It'd be up to the county commission to appropriate the money they pay for that, or they could say, no, we can't do that.
So before you pass a policy in your civil service board that's gonna cost funds, it would be wise to speak with the county commission and say, is this something that we're gonna be able to realistically do?
This is what it's gonna cost to fund this, or you wanna fund it.
And if not, we're spinning our wheels because we could pass it, but nobody writes a check for it, it's not gonna happen.
So not only should they communicate with the sheriff's department, they should communicate with a budget committee too, also.
And that's why we structured budget to be our last commission, legislative committee meeting of the particular month, so that they've heard all the various other committees and that they're the last one to kind of give their stamp on it.
And that's where they can talk to the budget director or somebody like Mike or somebody in finance and say, we'd like to provide this benefit. How that translates to dollars? What's that translated to dollars? We can't do that, or we can do that. Which is it?
That's where the secretary
goes in. Is that all?
Yeah, I think this other one had already been answered on the.
I have a question on job descriptions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I've had the employees come up with, the department has come up with the job descriptions. We're a small rural county, and a lot of us wear what I call multiple hats. There was a concern by one or two employees. I'll use me as an example. I am the bookkeeper. Now, let's say my job description is A, B, C, D, E, F. That's what I'm paid to do. That's my job description. But I'm also doing G through Z because there's no one else to do it. Now, let's say this employee gets disciplined because they dropped a ball number P, and that's not really in their job description. They were just doing it because there's no one else to do it, but now they got disciplined or got in trouble because they dropped this 363rd ball that they were juggling. So their concern about turning in these job descriptions is, do we turn in the clinical job description, or do we actually turn in what we do all day long and encompass it? Is that person then going to be saddled with, well, that ball was your responsibility? Well, no, that ball was something extra I do because no one else will do it. It's not exactly my responsibility. There were some concerns with a few employees who do a lot more than their job description, that what is the proper job description, the real one or the clinical one?
I would use the real one, and most job descriptions I've ever seen are written at the bottom. It says something, and all additional duties thus assigned.
Right.
So if I assign you something, even if it's outside your clinical job description, you fail to do it, it's insubordination. Now, at some point, somebody is giving way too many balls to juggle, and it's diminishing returns. So I see the point. But at the end, if I'm a jailer and there's nobody working in maintenance and toilets are overflowing and a sergeant tells me to get a bucket and a mop, I'm a mopper right
Oh,
then, you know?
and ours do.
But I mean, we're all like that, so I've always seen the job descriptions that have there at the bottom, you know, and all other duties, you know, needed and assigned within reason, so I would make my job descriptions as complete as possible, and still leave room in there for things additionally assigned, because from time to time in emergency services, that's part of what makes sheriff's department so unique. You know, you're gonna have, and in a small department, people need to be generalists. You know, and I don't say this bragging, it's because I've just been around a long time. I've actually done work with places as big as New York and as small as, you know, Hancock County. And what's interesting is, you take a deputy in a small county, believe it or not, they know more about different things in law enforcement than a New York City policeman standing on the corner doing this, because that's what they do every day. Whereas the deputy sheriff is expected to do 100 different things.
Everything that comes up.
You gotta be an investigator, psychologist, you gotta be first aid administrator, you gotta do all kinds of stuff. So your job descriptions in a small sheriff's department, sheriff's office, is gonna be
Broader.
more encompassing, broader. A bookkeeper, you know, in a large company sits there and keeps the books. You do more than keeping the books, because I talk with you a lot, okay? So I know that. So I would say to them, give yourselves credit for what you do.
Well, see, I advocated the full one, and I told the employee that was concerned about it, how can the Civil Service Board help us and look after our interests if we just give them the clinical definition of what we do? They need to know what we do.
I would be job specific, and then, but at the bottom, which may include.
Mine is 2 pages.
Yes, I know, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because, you know, in a small agency, you have to be a generalist.
Right.
You get an opportunity to do a lot
Okay,
of different things.
I agree with you, but since someone had voiced a concern, I felt the need to ask about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, just like a mayor in a small county does a lot of things that a mayor in a large county doesn't do.
She's the only one that'll fit in our generator.
There you go.
We put her on the hamster wheel and it quit.
Well, and I'll relate this back to my military side, is that, it's about accountability sometimes. The more specific your job description is, the more it gives you teeth for accountability, you know, because that job description is so detailed that they either fall within doing that particular job or they don't. But then there's that other that we talk about. And so when I rate my soldiers, I go under other, and whatever their subliminal duties are will be listed somewhat under that other. That, hey, even though you're you know, a combat medic, you might have to be a convoy guy one time, and you know, whatever it takes to do the unit. So we can write those job descriptions like that.
You just need that catch-all phrase at the end.
Because ultimately though, you don't want to necessarily give someone grounds to say, well, wait a minute, that wasn't part of my job description.
Right.
You know, they can, if they do drop the ball, or if it was something an expectation that you had on them, it may give them a little bit wiggle room to say, hey, that's not what, you know. The more specific you are, the more accountable the position.
And the more correct.
Yeah.
And it will also help the sheriff when, you know, he's looking at these candidates, knowing he has this exhaustive list in his mind of what he's expecting them to do, whereas somebody that maybe doesn't work there, maybe somebody on the Civil Service Board thinks, well, they wouldn't even know that might be something they have to be able to do. You know, and I don't know what the requirement is here, but I've worked with places, I've worked at places where all the law enforcement officers had to take a swim test because they had enough cases where they had to rescue people that they, everybody there had to know how to swim. And that knocked a lot of people out. You know? So, I mean, it just depends on the specific location of what you're expected to be able to do.
So since we're trying to get everything on the right foot, and this has been around for a while, I know he's needing people, and this is not gonna be done in a month's time, I know that. So that we've got everything up front and we're legit about getting him the people to meet, do we continue like we're doing? Or what is the approach to that now?
Because he's in dire need of people.
That is my question. I know we're trying to get it on the right track. He needs people. This is not going to happen in a month's time. But to be on the...
Well, right now you have a process that you have been sporadically using with this test.
Correct.
Okay. So So that at least that involves the civil service board. And the sheriff seems to think that it's working okay, right?
It's working very well.
So personal opinion, you tell me what you interject, what you all think. I think that, you know.
I just wanna make sure we're doing it right.
There's no, get an E for effort, that you're trying to do the process, as opposed to just saying we're gonna do nothing for 6 months until we get it perfect. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of good, right? You know, you're not where you need to be, but you're in the process of an improvement plan on how to get there. And if everybody's satisfied that, you know, it's okay, I personally, what do you think? Just keep rolling on?
I think you owe it to the people that have tested, that have applied and tested. In their mind, this is the process that the county has established.
They did what was asked of
Even
them.
though they don't know anything behind the scenes of what's occurred over a period of time, but in all fairness, they applied and they tested. So I would have that list that's been developed, and I would keep feeding the sheriff that list for those employees. Obviously, get that policy and procedure done, get it in place, and then start making your adjustments as you.
I just wanna make sure we're going in the right direction.
And I think there's a 6-month grandfathering in too, right? So if you.
Yeah, like if the first year that you adopted the civil service law, if you'd been, a deputy had been working there for 6 months, they were automatically grandfathered. It was silent on the, okay, if you're there less than 6 months, I assume you had to take the test and so forth. So you could kind of use that as a guide that if I've been working here for 8 months or a year and I haven't taken the test, I'm grandfathered in, but you're working on making that stop. And don't think you've got to come up with a 3-inch notebook. As you do a chapter, you can implement it. Say, okay, from now on, here's the procedure for this part. And then you still keep building on that while you're kind of limping through and trying to do what you've been doing as you're correcting it for the future.
And I think Jim had a good point too, the fact that maybe things hadn't gone as perfectly or as smoothly as you had hoped. I would not want any current employees to suffer because of that.
Right.
It's not their fault, you know, and they're working, they're doing a good job, and no reason. So I would say, okay, we're starting here, kind of getting a fresh start. We're going to keep rolling what we're rolling until we can get. I would set myself some benchmarks to force yourself to, you know, get to this next stage, and maybe have a goal of, I don't know what's reasonable for you all, you know, a goal first of the year or whatever that we're gonna be where we need to be, and then kind of hold yourself to some standards there, especially as the sheriff says, you know, he really needs the people and it seems to be working okay. To me, that would seem reasonable, and I would suggest you do that too.
And this board, this is both for the law enforcement side, deputy side, and the jail side.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about jails, there's a question that I've had is there a minimal required amount of deputies that has to be staffed or on file or with, you know, in the sheriff's department? Because I would think that the jail side probably has some specifics like that, like prisoner population is based, if you've got so much prisoner population, you have to have one jailer per population.
That's Jim's baby.
But I'm not sure that the law side of that has that same requirement that the jails have. I don't know. That's why I had the question, so I wanted to ask it.
Well, I can address for the jail side, there is no inmate to staff ratio. It's based on the design of your facility, it's based on workload, it's based on relief factors. They don't just perform duties inside the jail, they're transporting to other counties, to the Department of Corrections, to hospitals, they're doing everything outside. So there's staff needed to do that, certainly supervisory staff, service staff. So it's based on the facility. There's no set ratio out there for a certain number of officers per inmates, but it's a formal process that we go through to determine what those staffing needs are. We actually did a staffing study 10 years ago here, 11 years old, 10 or 11 years ago, when the jail was under construction. We got to about the 90% mark, and it was never finished. Based on the mayor at the time and the sheriff at the time, they felt that they had enough information to move forward at that point. Law enforcement side, a little bit more trickier.
Yeah, the law enforcement side, we don't do staffing studies for that for a variety of reasons. One is that with a jail, you have fixed posts, you have a fixed geographic location, you know, it's obviously like the person here, this person there. soon as you get into the patrol side, you have to consider geography, not just population, because you have a very large geographic location, a small population. You gotta take into account the cities within the county. Even though the county has jurisdiction throughout the whole county, typically the cities take care of the city, even though the sheriff still has authority and responsibility there. And if the city police departments went away, the county sheriff would be responsible for everything, you know, he's still responsible for all that. The sheriff has certain mandated duties out, you know, now they do have mandated duties to patrol, they do have mandated duties for the courts, the jail, and the cert process. You also have to look at the idea of obligated versus unobligated time, relief factors depending on your shift. So it's a lot more subjective, and you can, typically the studies now will use an idea that you're gonna spend about 60 to 70% of your time answering calls, and about 30 to 40% of your time free to answer, to patrol, which is gonna be different for different locations. So, usually comes down to the sheriff is obligated to do these certain duties, and then when he or she decides that they don't have enough personnel to do that, then they have to make the argument to the county commission that I don't have enough people to do what the law says I have to do. And then we all know what ends up happening if they keep butting heads forever and nobody wants it, it's the salary, the salary suits. And then somebody else decides, who's more reasonable, this side or this side. But, for that reason, we don't really get involved in the staffing studies on the patrol side because there's so many different factors. But if somebody's interested in that, I can point to some things. I just did we did a presentation in Knox County and gave them a lot of information where they could conduct one themselves and some formulas and some articles and suggestions out there. But you have to factor in what calls you're answering, what other obligations you have. There's so many variables to take into account. But there is no magic number on either side that says if you have this, you must have that. It comes down to, are you able to do the duties that you're mandated to do? And are you able to keep your people safe? We're working with a county right now that, the sheriff says, I can't keep my people or the inmates safe in this jail because I don't have enough people. That's the argument for that, and he's got, a lot of things in there that he can point to as far as injuries and things. So it's subjective, and it doesn't just have a formula easily to plug in.
Whereas the jail does have a formula.
Yeah, the sheriff's got a comment.
Back on the jail side, when I spoke with Jim, I think you did this, as you said, you started doing the study and our county got to 90% or so, and then they just stopped and didn't do anything. So at that point, that's when they come in with a 138 bed facility and said, we're gonna put 6 people per shift. And that's the way it's always been until we just recently lost some people, just don't have the positions to fill them, but that's where we were set at. We had 4 shifts, 6 each is where we've been ever since I've been there. And I was there when the jail was built. On the patrol side, I don't know if I can find it, and I would like to have that study that you're talking about if we could, if it's not too much trouble. But I did receive something, and I don't remember what department it was from, but it stated that the sheriff's department in our county, it said that we was recommended for 25 deputy personnel all told. And the state said that, and the fed said 30. And it also gives some ridiculous figures about how much we're supposed to be funded to. We won't ever get to that. But that's what it was showing us, that we was like half or 3/4 of $1 billion short, which they, But that's what they recommended, and I can see if I can find that. I know I held on to it. But if we could get that study, it would give us a basis to go on, and what we've operated on so far since these jails have been built is just what they set up when it was built, that they would, because I remember we had to hire several because we had a much larger facility, and it takes longer to get from point A to point B. And right now, our jail is full. I think we're at 136 today. And we've been as high as 142, 144. So, and on weekends we still get up to that. So we do need to maintain at least the 6 that we have.
I got a question. On the jail study, is this something that we could finish or start over and get an
I
accurate
would start
study?
over. It's too many years as
Right. That's why I want.
Yeah, I would start over on it if I was asked to do another one. I just sent you, what was it, a couple months ago, I sent you the one that we did.
Yes.
But,
Would that be something the sheriff has to initiate?
you just asked me,
There you go, really easy, right here.
And it would probably help you if the policy procedures manual were done, because that would also help you with your relief factor and all those other things, right? No vacation.
We got one question right here, if y'all don't mind. Go ahead.
I'll make it fast, Chairman. Thank y'all for being here tonight. On the state prisoners, when they're being transported to another county or another state, does the state reimburse the county for the transportation cost?
County to county, no. Typically, and you're talking about transfer out of state, typically the state that is receiving them would come pick them up. If we're picking them up from another state, there's a process to get reimbursed for those transport costs. But county to county, no.
So we have a county to state prison.
County to state prison, there is a funding source for one officer, and it's based on, and I don't know the figure off the top of my head, it's very minimal, but it's basically the support for one officer doing that transport, whether you're moving one inmate or 15 inmates.
A question I got, state prisoners or payment, okay, you know, you got state inmates and then you may have non-state inmates that you're holding. If we're holding them for another county, are they obligated to pay us for those particular prisoners? So if Carroll County says, I need y'all to take 20, 30 prisoners off our hands, are they obligated financially to us when they do that, or is it just by the grace of our?
Why would you do that?
I don't know. I want to ask. That my question was going to be, out of 140 prisoners, we only have 30 state prisoners.
We have 30.
Which means we've got 110 non-state prisoners as far as are allocated.
So once a state inmate comes into your custody, the reimbursement comes from you submit it for the reimbursement to the state. And what a lot of sheriff's offices will do is they'll say, I have 10 beds or 20 beds available. Send me 10 or 20 state inmates. So they may come from Henry County or Carroll County or what have you to your county. Carroll County is not going to reimburse you for that.
But
You're going to submit your reimbursement to the state. Now, some counties will house, and particularly counties in extreme crowded situations, they will farm their inmates out to other counties. Pretrial misdemeanors, sentenced misdemeanors, locally sentenced felons or pretrial felons. And those counties will enter into an agreement for payment. And what I'm starting to see the trend across the state, at least in East Tennessee, is the payment is that cost payment, not the $39 a day.
State rate or whatever.
Yeah, so some counties are charging $50, $54 a day to house another county's inmates. Plus, you're still on the hook for the medical care. There's all kinds of different agreements that are made out there, but I getting in the business of boarding other people's problems, that doesn't make sense to me.
We've had a couple situations when the fire marshal's office closed jails, and they had to find a place to put if the judges wouldn't release them on time served or give them a lower bond to get out of jail, then counties were paying other counties, like Jim said, $40, $50 a day to house them until they could get the fire marshal off their back.
Gray County, for example, is housing 70 inmates a day all over the state.
We've got 20 of those.
15, sir.
Yeah.
Right now.
15.
Gray County to here, they're
15
housing.
from Ray, 10 from Dyer.
There's a jail rule on that. The host county, the one that's keeping someone else's prisoners. The other county's paying all the medical bills. I mean, they're just, the county that's taking care of their other county's prisoners, they're getting a rate so much a day. But plus any kind of expenses out of the ordinary, but the county that the prisoner came from is paying all the medical bills. It's a whole lot better deal than keeping state prisoners. The bottom line is.
That's what I want to make sure that he's getting the money he's due.
Yeah, he's better off keeping other counties' prisoners than he is state prisoners, I guarantee you. You don't have any medical bills, you make them responsible for it.
They're responsible.
They come to you with their hat in their hand. That's when you negotiate.
Ray County their jail's under construction, I think, and that's what we got there, is they bring them all the way up here and just tell us, we're gonna pay you the state rate plus any medical that you have, so it's a win-win
It
for us.
sounds to me like, though, you can set the rate instead of, hey, we're giving you this
That's
much.
correct, you can set the.
You've got the option of saying, hey, no, it's gonna be a little more.
Well, if we get them, we may get in that situation, and we're gonna get it back, so.
He's right.
State rate, and we swap inmates with all these other counties. If we've got one here that he's creating problems for us, we try to send him somewhere where he don't know anybody, get him out of his element, and we'll take one of theirs.
Right.
Swap out with them, and the only cost we have is if we have to take them to court or anything like that. And, that's, whenever we, just like with Ray County, and also with Dyer County, we went in with them and they said, here you go, and, you know, state rate, and we're gonna send you people we're not having any problem with, because we're overcrowded, we need to get them out. Said, okay, we'll take them, we won't fill our jail up. So we took those inmates in, and we haven't had any problems with them so far.
And another question I always get hit with, and I always just, like I say, I don't do payroll, I defer to my payroll personnel, so to speak. But, and with the sheriff's department, they have odd shifts, they work long shifts, whatever. So, I've had one question posed to me as to, they didn't feel like they were getting their fair share, that they were working beyond the 40-hour increment, but they were on 12-hour shifts or whatever it may be. So I went in, someone threatened, well, labor laws are at effect here. You know, I'm getting messed over by this and that, and I've got a complaint or a lawsuit against the county. Unfair pay or whatever it may be. So I asked my payroll personnel, and I said, what is going on? Like, you know, so that I understand it better. And first thing they said, that the sheriff's payroll is the first thing the auditors go for when they first come in to do our annual audit. That's the very first thing, because they know the complication of these labor. So far, I guess we've checked out all right. We haven't had a finding or a violation based upon payroll. However, I get the question asked all the time, so I kind of wanted to pose that to y'all just to clarify, so we're all understanding of that complex issue. So,
Public safety's under what they call the 7K exemption, which their overtime doesn't start at 40 hours or 80 hours. Is it 168 or 171 hours? 171 hours in a 30-day or 28-day cycle. We get this a lot too, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong. It's based on hours actually worked. So sometimes it'll be like, well, I went over the 171 hours, but if they were on vacation for 40 hours, you take that back out of that. It doesn't count, so it's actually hours worked. You don't start getting overtime until you actually work hours over the 171 in a 28-day period. And that's designed because, you know, the federal labor standards folks know that it's different for public safety, it's different for firemen and things like that. Where sometimes sheriff's departments get themselves in trouble is they misclassify people, and for instance, dispatchers, clerical people, secretaries are not under that same exemption.
40 hours.
Because they're under 40 hours. Because they're not, you know, in the crime fighting, you know, crime crushing, you know, public safety exception. But Michelle's got it down, she knows who's supposed to get what, and most places are still okay with it now. It's rare that we find, you know, a problem with that, but sometimes employees don't understand that. But if you go to the Wage and Hour, Federal Wage and Hour website, and you look at their fun fact sheets, there's actually a fact sheet for public safety, and it's a one-pager. It lays it out, and it's a good little talking point thing for folks that if you don't come across it, shoot me an email and I'll send it back to you, because I just did it for somebody else. And it's a good explanation for employees that think that they're not getting what they're supposed to get.
The other issue I see out in West Tennessee, more so than the middle and the east, is I put everybody on a salary. But there's a difference between salary exempt and non-exempt.
Right.
So there are some people who are on salary that do qualify for overtime.
Mm-hmm.
There are some that are on salary that do not qualify for overtime, and that's sometimes it's a hard theory to explain to people. But I've seen a lot more counties get in trouble on the non-exempt versus exempt than the actual calculation of overtime.
The other issue I see, I thought we were headed to is, John is in uniform and works an 8-hour shift. Now, I'm in uniform, but I work 12 hours or 10 hours. And some of the civil service or county policies will say that if you earn 8 hours of vacation every month, or you earn 8 hours of sick time each month. So when John wants to take a vacation day, he takes one vacation day. When I want to take a vacation day on my 12-hour shift, I've got to take my 8 hours, and I'm still on the hook for 4 hours, or I've got to take a day and a half. So as you start developing that policy, the Civil Service Committee, you may want to consider a day, or you may want to separate how that rate of earning is for 8 versus 12 versus 10.
I can answer that, sir. Every sheriff's department employee earns 8 hours of sick time a month on the last day of the month. Vacation day is earned annually based on the shift you work. So a vacation day for a CO would be 12 hours. A vacation day for me would be 8 hours. You have to use it in a full day increment because there's no way to break that down. So that's how we do that.
And that's
But it makes certain it's in your civil service insurance.
Make sure it's in that policy.
And that's why you want that person on your side in the
Well,
meeting,
yeah.
because it's something that you can chase around for an hour. She just
And some, since we got so many commissioners in here, I want y'all to understand, like in the budget this year, we put in something called contracted services, okay? And one thing you're gonna see me bring to the commission here soon is, we're not experts. I mean, you don't need me writing policies. You know what I mean? We need the people who write policies to write them. And so, we're going to hire someone who does this for a living. You know what I mean? Who is an expert at this. And so they're gonna help us get our policies in order in this county, because I'm not mistaken, the sheriff, you can correct me, in the last sheriff's handbook dated 2001 or something, you know.
2012.
Well, I saw one 2001 or whatever, so I wanna make sure that it's not just the sheriff's department, that it's my department, that it's everybody's department that has these policies that are up to date, you know, addressing today's needs. And so you may see someone here, we may not tackle this for another 3, 4, 5 months, but when that person does come in, that's what they're gonna be charged with, assisting these committees like yours so that y'all are only here so many hours a month, you know, it's gonna set them up for success. So I just wanted y'all to know that we're gonna try to get all these policies and procedures up to date, effective, and streamlined to the need that we have. So.
While you're talking about policies and procedures, just out of curiosity, if you got a set of local rules for the county commission, it'd be called local rules or bylaws.
Rules of order is what we call them.
Just rules of order is one thing, but does it cover, but that's something, once you get it, you was talking about that old policy. I got counties that Scotland was adopted 20 years ago and ain't a soul knows where they're at. Well, they're not any good. You need to look at them once a year. You need to be going over them annually. Because there's going to be some changes in the law, as Jim said earlier, things become effective. It never have been effective before, you need to address it. You gotta strive to get better each year. So you need to reevaluate things.
And I understand that the budget committee is in charge of our rules of order. So as soon as our budget's passed, hopefully this month, starting in August, you know, I will kind of bring forth to them, hey, here's the rules of order. Look at it. Let's get one passed in September, you know, and then we should be passing every September. But then how often we really tweaked it, you know, and so that. But I understand the budget committee is the one who heads that process.
And you probably need it probably done before, during election year, they take office in September. You don't need a bunch of greenhorns
coming in.
You actually need it done before, where they got 11 months under their belt before they look at it again. So, but when you start looking at it, if you holler at me, I'll just send you a laundry list.
Okay.
Half of them may not be anything you're interested in, but I can send you a laundry list of things you need to consider. Some of you may consider it and throw it away. That's fine. But,
right now we're kind of operating under the one that's in effect, which was the previous years. We didn't do anything this year because we had new personnel. Again, like I said, we didn't want anyone messing it up. But now they've got a good year under their belt, the newbies, and I feel like maybe they should. And if they take a year before they actually propose it, that's fine. But that's something that we need to, as a county, a legislative body, look at and get up to date on. Marty, you came in late, you know, we addressed a lot of questions, we can get with you offline, but do you have a question off?
All my questions, you know, I submitted,
They went over some of your questions.
you or them after me.
Well, I'll take it back to the chairman.
Do you gentlemen have anything else? Is there anything more to come before the commission?
If I just ask one favor?
Yes, sir.
I'll be happy.
If you want dinner, I told you.
I already took care of that. And we'll be happy to answer questions and try to help along the way. Like I said, I'd even be willing to come back up. It would be beneficial if the committee or the civil service committee could meet together and then have either the chair or one designated person send us questions, so we don't get a multitude of redundancy, and we're sending out, and be happy to speak with any commissioner, but it would also be helpful if they work through the committee. It would just help save time and streamline our time.
We have to do that on the budget committee.
I cover 95 states, Jim covers 95 counties. It seems like states sometimes, but we cover 95 counties.
We also did that with the county attorney, to making sure that the legislative questions came through the chairman, the administrative questions came through the mayor's office. And
it's not that we're too good to talk to anybody, it's just that I left Bristol today, we're just all over the state, so it would help us to be more efficient. Right back to you.
So I'd say commissioners refer through Daryl Hicks here, and I would say through Erica Lynch, who is our chairman of our.
And the mayor and the sheriff wants to, whatever, contact us anytime, that sheriff, the mayor. And, so.
All you guests came tonight, mayor, are specialists, except this one right here. He's got every elected official in his district. He ain't just working with sheriffs, not just with county commissioners, not just with mayors. Every elected official in the county is Mike's responsibility.
That's why he's quiet.
He's not saying much tonight, he's great. But he's the one really carrying the load, I'm just telling you.
Well, and I did not bother him. I know that to just pick my times to go to him on and try to make his life a little easier and everything, but he's been a great resource, all of you have. We really appreciate you coming.
Very much.
I wanted to facilitate this because, like I said, I'm not the sheriff and I'm not civil service board. I'm like, hey, the best way to do all this is let's get the informational experts in, and so I think they've been a great benefit tonight.
I think it's a great idea to invite all of us here. It's not happening. This doesn't happen very often. So this is a rare thing.
Y'all want to come once a month? The way you just said it, they wasn't going to be in.
This county commission has really taken a lot of vested interest in the county in the last year. They've done a great job. They've been involved. They've asked questions. We've got an audit committee chairman, Mr. Judge Paul Summers, who's been very proactive, getting subject matter experts in. I think this is great that we do this. We want to get better as a county. And having y'all here is just one step of many that we'll continue taking, but I'm proud of the county commission, the boards that we appoint. I think everybody's been engaged. And that's how we make our county better. Whether you're for or against, whether you win an argument or not, the main thing is the engagement.
So. The people, you're taking care of the citizens of this county. That's all of your responsibility.
All right, before we adjourn, the sheriff had.
I just want to thank everybody for taking such an interest in getting this civil service board set up, and I'm looking really forward to working with all of you. We've needed it set up for a long time. It keeps everybody on board where we need to be. I appreciate the time, and we really need to thank these guys, because I've spoke with them earlier, and they drove a long way. This came from Bristol, and who knows where Jim comes from. He just pops up everywhere. No matter where I go, Jim is there. And Terry, I appreciate y'all driving the distance that you have to be here. You give us a lot of information that's got us moving forward anyway. I think we all really appreciate what you've done.
And my selfish interest as a county mayor is we're selling a lot of property. In the next month and a half, I'd love for y'all to become big county taxpayers. We've got a list of about 270 properties that we'll be selling, and I'll be more than happy to show them.
Any lakefront?
Very close.
We might have some next to a golf course.
Yeah, a lot of them there.
All right, is there anything else? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second? All in favor?
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.